Okay, welcome back to episode 9 of Ag Inspire, conversations with interesting people doing inspiring things in agriculture. And this morning I am delighted to be joined by Barbara Bray, MBE. We might find out a little bit about what MBE is in a small bit. A food safety consultant, an Nuffield scholar, a registered nutritionist, and somebody who I came across first on a TED Talk talking about diet, diversity and the future of food. Welcome to Ag Inspire Conversations, Barbara.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here after such illustrious people have come before me.
You're the second person, and I suppose people might find it unusual that a vet has such an interest in a diversity of areas in agriculture and food. You're the second person I've had on who's interested in the future of food. And Jack Bobo was our food futurist, and I had to practice that one before I actually interviewed him. But I think it's really fascinating, and I suppose I will talk a bit about your role as a nutritionist, and you're a director of Oxford Farming Conference. But I've tried to understand where people are, Barbara, to kind of go back and look at where people have come from and their journey into agriculture. So I suppose give people a little bit of background yourself on how you got involved in food systems and agriculture in general.
I guess it starts in childhood, doesn't it? When you're a child, you're exposed to lots of different things, and it comes from the people around you. So I grew up in County Durham. So my parents, they're originally from Ghana in West Africa. They came to the UK as students. They were both based in Edinburgh. And for my dad, he got his first job as a junior doctor in a place called Darlington in County Durham, after moving around several places. And their ambition was always to go back to Ghana, West Africa, and live there. But with civil unrest and civil war and just the political situation becoming quite unstable, they actually ended up staying in Darlington, and they're still there now. And for people who don't know the northeast of England, it is quite rural in places. You've got lots of, in the 1970s when I grew up, there were lots of coal mines, so it was a heavy mining industry. But also, seeing cows and sheep was quite normal in my environment. Going to primary school and nursery, the other kids were farmers' kids. So I was exposed to agriculture at a young age. It was kind of a nice mix of hanging out with other doctors' kids and hanging out with farm kids and not much else really.
Okay.
So it was perfectly natural for us to go and do things like pick your own. When I was little, I got introduced to drinking raw milk from the cow, something that I'd not let any small children in the family do at all. Back in the 70s, you could do anything, couldn't you? So I just thought everybody's lifestyles were like that, and everybody lived in a town that had an abattoir and a cattle market, because I hadn't been anywhere else. And it's only when you go to places like London or Edinburgh, you're like, where's the cattle market? Do you not have one of those? So for me, childhood was all about agriculture and food, so growing it, eating it, and just being excited by it, because my parents, having come from a background of being quite close to agriculture, where you'd go and harvest your crop, maybe take your corn to get it milled, or slaughtering your own chickens and goats. So they were a lot closer to the food system, I guess. And I guess that's where I got my love of food from. It was being inspired by the way that they cooked and how they shared that food fascination, especially my dad, about food chemistry and how you can put different things together.
And that's probably one of our things we'll discuss, is the great challenge of the food system, is that removal from where our food comes from. And you were so lucky to have it from your parents and where you lived, but there's this massive disconnect now around food, and it creates a void, Barbara, doesn't it, about what messaging fills in between it. And particularly, I suppose, from a dietary perspective, and I work on farms, but I keep telling farmers that we're in the food business, and ultimately we're in the human health business, because diet is key to our health.
Definitely, and I think it's easy to forget that, but I think the food and agriculture sector has done such a good job of providing food on a regular basis for everybody's needs, so nobody's had to question it. But now we're in a situation where we've had COVID-19 pandemic. People are starting to look under the cover and saying, actually, what is going on? What do I need to stay healthy and not get sick? Or if I get sick, I want to make a quick recovery. And, people are now focusing more on diet and lifestyle as a key to getting better health. Unfortunately, that's not the only key to better health. I'm currently in the midst of reading The Health Gap by Sir Michael Marmot. He's somebody whose reports I've always been fascinated with. So in 2010, he wrote the Marmot Report, and that was looking at the state of the society in the UK, looking at why if you lived in a certain postcode, your health outcome and your lifespan was going to be shorter than if you lived in another one. And actually, when you look at the data, it does show that where you live is the biggest determinant to health and quality of life, not actually the fact that you eat broccoli every day. So we have got bigger issues to overcome, and diet is just one of those things. But obviously, if people don't have enough money to buy food, or if they don't have a secure roof over their head, the stress of the lifestyle actually plays a bigger part in influencing their poor health outcomes.
And that's something you're very passionate about. I know I suppose, I don't know you, but I feel like I know you because I listened to your TED Talk. And but it's those socioeconomic factors that influence people. And one of the things, and I did an Nuffield scholarship like yourself, which is an incredible experience that opens your mind, was, the first time I was presented with the idea of the food system globally, and 700 or 800 million people going to bed starving at night, and then nearly 1 billion people suffering a separate issue, which is food poverty, which is obesity, and back to poor diet again. And I think I sense it's something you're very passionate about. What steps do we need to take around? I know it's a very difficult question about bridging those gaps, not just in underdeveloped countries, but in developed societies where there's these massive gaps. What are the strategies you're thinking about, and how do we make food more inclusive, and it's just not a choice that I'm lucky to have, that I can make whatever I want? What are your thoughts on that, Barbara? How do we progress that?
I think first and foremost, it needs a multidisciplinary approach, because I think historically what happens is governments make policy, food industry work together on their initiatives and how to get food out, and the third sector picks up the gap. And it's about making sure that all the different disciplines are working together. So the government policy works with how we produce food, how we retail it, and also looking at, from a social point of view, how we ensure that people have got enough money to live. We don't want a society where there are people who can only afford just to put a roof over their head and they have to go to the food bank, whereas everybody else who can afford to pay their bills and pay for food goes to the retail outlet. So I think it's about time we brought things together and maybe looked at how we can provide food in a way that's going to be more equitable. So for example, when I was at primary school, everybody got free milk, free meals. That's just how it was. Even at secondary school, not necessarily free milk, but we got free meals. It was just, there was no kind of division between the haves and the haves not. We just ate what was available. Unless you had an allergy or some sort of problem or religious excuse, you ate what was put in front of you. There was a little bit of choice, but the 1970s were take it or leave it. So I think, we need to go back to, if you look at the National Food Strategy, is actually saying that we need to look after the disadvantaged children. I'd take it one step further and just say provide meals across the school population completely, because we don't want people coming to school so hungry that they can't learn, they can't concentrate, and it causes other problems. If you look after the 0 to 16-year-olds, that's a lot of the problem taken away. In fact, in nutrition terms, your first 1,000 days is so crucially important before you even get to school. So programs supporting the first 1,000 days of life are so crucial, because you need to look after the mother and the child. And going back to the Michael Marmot report, looking at how we focus on public health, we don't look after women and children with small children. And at the UN have also said that more recently in the UK, our kind of mechanisms for doing that have got worse. So it's more, it's not like anti-women, but the outcomes of women in our society are becoming poorer and poorer and poorer, even though I think we're either the 5th or the 6th richest nation in the UK. So how are we becoming more wealthy? But actually there's a whole group of people whose outcomes are reducing as time goes on. And we can't justify that, especially as a wealthy country.
And as a society, it's a challenge for a lot of developed countries, not just the UK. It's something we face here in Ireland as well. I think we do take it well, but the system does need to we need to look at how we can make it better. And is it, and I know I look at my own children and diet and nutrition, just because we can afford food, we don't always make the right choices either. But should it be about, and we try and do it at home, is educating our kids about where food comes from, you know, the cooking process. You know, everyone mentions about processing itself. The more processing, in simple terms, I think is more unhealthy food can become. Is that what we need to do as well as just giving children food to eat if they need it, but actually education? Is that something we can do better?
Well, I'm sure we can do it better. And I keep going back to my own childhood. I think being exposed to food from its source has been really helpful. And not everyone wants to have a career in food and agriculture. I'm not saying that they have to, but I think that knowledge and that learning, it's about something that you're putting in your mouth every single day. We all have to eat. So understanding about what we're eating and where it comes from is important. I wouldn't say it's the be all and end all, because there'll always be some groups to society where it's just about fuel. But I think for everybody else, yes, we need to make sure that we've got that education in place, because we've already got the basics. But if you haven't got the basics, then worrying about, you know, did my carrots grow in a really carrot-friendly way is kind of relevant. You just want to get fed, don't you? But I think we need to work towards making sure that everybody has the basics. And then you start layering on the additional information.
I know that you're an avid swimmer. I follow you on social media, and you go swimming in this river. So you're an avid enthusiast for exercise, and like myself. But one of my challenges is diet itself. You know, it's so hard to make those decisions. And you had I suppose to lead yourself into the nutrition space. You had personal experiences with, maybe from your own story, about an unhealthy diet and making that shift. Can you tell people a little bit about that? Because I think is that kind of key to the way you think now about food, is your own personal experiences?
I think it was a wake-up call for me, because I was sleepwalking into, you know, through my 40s, thinking everything's fine, nothing to see here. And you know, when you're younger and people say if you carry on that way, you're going to end up like X, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Because I'd look at my mother's sisters, and you know, they were all really trim and healthy, even though, you know, when they were in their 20s, smoking and drinking was normal for that generation. They all did it. Even into their 70s, they were still drinking. So I was like, well, what could possibly go wrong? And I remember one of my cousins saying to me, there's a fat person in you waiting to get out. And we're not very diplomatic in my family.
Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes a great quote I got on one of the Ag Inspire conversations was, we're only able to grow to the level of criticism we can take. Now, there's a difference between criticism and bullying. I'll take that. But I think constructive feedback is good, Barbara.
Let's just call it constructive feedback. So yeah, because in my 20s, I could more or less, I was doing so much exercise and having such a busy lifestyle, I was able to get away with those food choices. But obviously, as you age, you can't carry on with that lifestyle unless you're still doing lots of sport and having that balance of having a good quality lifestyle. And I just found that I was having a more sedentary lifestyle, but my eating habits hadn't really changed. And I'd gone down a more social route. So I was going out for dinner more. I was, you know, still drinking a lot, not necessarily sat at home with a bottle of wine, but if you're going out for dinner and going to catch up with friends, you're obviously going to be drinking. So various health reasons or various health issues, because I mean, I had a big car accident in my late 20s. And so I'd always taken care from an exercise point of view, but I hadn't really focused on diet once I got better. But later on in life, I had other health issues come up, and I realised that if I wanted to be serious about my health, I'd have to stop drinking. And that wasn't a conscious choice. It was more, you know, I'm going to go into surgery in 3 months. I need to be surgery fit. And that was always one of my key things, because when you look at people who go into a hospital for surgery, they're not fit before they go in. And obviously the fact that they're ill means that's why they're going for surgery. But the fitter you are when you're going to have major surgery, the better your recovery and your outcome is going to be. And I've had lots of orthopedic surgery, for example. I know that when I've been to the gym, when I've looked after my health really, really well, my recovery has just stunned the orthopedic surgeons. This time around, I was going for a hysterectomy, completely different experience. And I just thought, I'm not going to mess with this because it can go badly wrong. So stopped drinking, started going and doing lots of exercise. So I was match fit, and I had a really quick recovery from that surgery. And I think I kind of became a little bit complacent then, because I thought, oh, my health issues are now over. But one thing that I learned when I did my MSc in human nutrition is that people from an Asian and a Black background, they will have a higher propensity for type 2 diabetes. So when you look at BMI, so body mass index, for our population, at 22 is when you get an issue. For the white population, it's BMI of 25. So my BMI has always been around 23, 24. So it's always been on the slightly higher side. So even though I've looked fairly slim and I haven't looked overweight, I was storing up a problem for later life, because I've got a family history of heart disease, a family history of type 2 diabetes, but everyone in my family is thin. So that really should have sent alarm bells ringing. But I was kind of like, well, you know, what's the worst that could happen? I'll make sure I do the right things. But my wake-up call came after my Nuffield Farming Scholarship, because you're traveling all the time and eating on the go and not necessarily paying attention to what you eat, because you just have to eat by a certain time in a certain place to get onto your next thing. And when I came back, I put on a little bit of weight. It didn't bother me because I thought, well, it'll naturally drop off. But then I realized I wasn't well. I went to the doctors, they tested me for type 2 diabetes, a whole range of things actually. And they said to me, oh, you're pre-diabetic. And that was my alarm bells ringing. It's like, okay, now the wheels have come off. I need to do something different. So I realized that I needed to go back to my behavior in my 20s, when I was doing a lot more exercise and being more careful about what I ate, because my day job, I'm spending a lot of time traveling to food factories, traveling to farms. And here's the irony, you know, I work with fresh produce growers who grow soft fruit, who grow lettuce. If I travel to one of their farms and I need to pick up lunch from somewhere, I have to pick up lunch from the Shell petrol station, from Subway. I can't actually buy a salad or a fruit salad anywhere near their farm.
Okay. And that's a challenge in itself. But you mentioned type 2 diabetes. And I do, look, I'm very curious and I do a lot of reading. And, you know, particularly around COVID, there was a lot of conversations around type 2 diabetes and it's playing in as a comorbidity to the seriousness of disease. It seems to be this huge issue that's bubbling away and overflowing in our populations is type 2 diabetes. And one of the things Jack Bogo said, who's a food futurist as well, he said that in the US, they spent €1 billion on food and health, and they spent 22 billion or more on medicine. And we have all these solutions for type 2 diabetes, which is injectables, measuring body, but essentially, talk to me about how we can control type 2 diabetes just by diet alone, really.
It's much wider than that, because you have to think about how people have ended up choosing that diet. So at the point at which they're making that choice, often there's a whole lot of other factors around that. So for example, I'm a nutritionist, I know what types of food I should be eating, but when I'm on the road and I have a choice of Shell, Subway or KFC, that's what I have to do. So last week I went down to a farm, stopped for lunch on the motorway, and I thought, well, I'll go into Marks and Spencer's and I'll get a salad. So Simply Food's closed at the moment, so I had to go to McDonald's, but I thought no problem, because you know I've got my app that tells me all the different things I can eat. I'm going to get a salad chicken wrap. So I went to McDonald's and there was no salad chicken wrap. So I ended up getting a chicken burger and chips. It's like, you know, that wasn't even the choice I wanted to make, just wasn't available. And yes, I ate a meal for fewer than 700 calories, so it wasn't a complete drama, but in terms of micronutrients, I'd wanted to get a couple of my 5 a day. That just wasn't going to happen. So sometimes the knowledge is there, but the choice isn't available. And also it's a financial aspect, because if I want to go and get a quick lunch, I can go to Greg's, I can go to McDonald's. There's a whole range of places where I can eat for less than £3. If I want to eat something that's got broccoli and tomatoes and brown pasta in it, chances are it's not going to be the same price. So we need to think about how we're able to facilitate people making better choices and making those choices within easy reach. So if somebody's got a reduced budget, let's not penalise them for taking that £2 in their pocket and buying a Cornish pasty and a can of Coke, because that's what that money buys. It doesn't buy anything that's healthier. Because by the time you paid for a fruit salad or a banana and other bits and pieces, you then haven't got enough money to buy the rest of the meal.
How do we make that shift in our food supply chains? Because certainly convenience is a massive driver. And I know that you're a food safety consultant, and you mentioned you were on farm all the way to the factory, so you're in the supply chain. How do food businesses, because you also mentioned in your TED Talk they have to be profitable, economics drives everything. How do we change our systems to make healthier food choices easier, more affordable and sustainable for the businesses who produce them? Because I know from talking to farmers as well, they will often feel like they're at the lowest roaming the ladder, and their fresh produce they don't have the control over. Is it a more direct model where farms supply directly to people, or does our existing supply chain have to improve?
I think the supply chain is incredibly efficient. It's how we purpose that supply chain. So if you look, for example, at what Public Health England announced earlier in the week, so on Monday they were talking about reducing or taking away advertising before 9 p.m. on fast food. They haven't defined what that fast food is, but we'll worry about that later. And a whole range of measures around feeding school children. So the intent is there, but I feel that it's a very one-size-fits-all approach. So it's all about what you're taking away. For me, if you're going to work with food manufacturers, it's about what you can add. So rather than say to a food manufacturer, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other, say what the outcome needs to be. The outcome needs to be we need more vitamin A in our diets. We need more beta-carotene in our food so that we can increase our level of vitamin A. We need more iron in our food so we can increase our iron status. We need more folate in our food so women are not giving birth to children with issues through lack of folic acid. We need more fibre in our food because we're only eating, on an average as a population, 18 grams of fibre a day, and we should be having 30 grams of fibre. That then gives people targets to be able to reformulate in a way that's constructive. If you just take out sugar and salt, there's no reason to add in better micronutrients. You just kind of taken out a macronutrient and gone, yeah, problem fixed. But actually, we need to eat healthier food. And that's where I think we should start to turn the dial, and manufacturers should be looking at how they can make the quality, the nutritional quality of their food better. So if you think back to last year when everyone was into plant-based trend and what have you, and high protein, it was all about chucking a bit extra protein into your snack bars. And I thought, well, to me, if you're buying a sweet snack, it's more about a treat. That's not, for me, where you should be getting your daily protein source from. Your daily protein source should be coming from a proper meal, so to speak, where you sat down and digested it properly and mindfully, and you haven't been eating it in the car on the run. I think if we're going to look at how we reformulate food, we should say, let's take fibre and focus on that and get more fibre into people. Or let's take a range of vegetables that we know are high in folate and can give us beta-carotene and work those into meal solutions. So when you go and eat at a restaurant or when you go and eat at a burger bar, you've got some of those nutrients in that food. Because remember, people eat a wide range of diets. It's all about having variety. And I think this is sometimes where farmers forget that you're selling a commodity, but actually people eat it form part of a diet. So having put on one particular type of food isn't necessarily helpful, because people don't go out and just buy beef. They buy beef because it's part of a roast dinner or it's part of a stir fry. It's got to be complemented by something else. People don't just go out and buy carrots. They're buying carrots because they're making a coleslaw or they're making a stir fry. So it's about looking at how people are eating and getting the message out to incorporate foods so they have a wide variety of things to pick from that fit within their budget. And no one would argue that carrots and broccoli are too expensive. The farmer might not get a lot of money for that those carrots and broccoli, but in terms of the price that they make up of the meal component, it's a smaller part of the meal component.
So Barbara, if you had your wish and you could, or you maybe have an example of a case study where this has worked, what does this look like over the next decade? Because we've kind of touched on some huge challenges: socioeconomic, dietary, choice, convenience. Have you examples of these, or if you had your wish, what would these alterations in our current food system look like? That's probably a hard question.
It is, but you asked me what would I wish for. So my wish would be that food manufacturers are looking at how they can incorporate the micronutrients we need better into their current offer, and that the food service sector embraces the initiatives that are already out there. So we have an initiative in England, Peas Please, and in fact I think it's UK-wide because it's also in Scotland and Wales. So it's all about making sure that people are trying to incorporate more vegetables into their current offer. So if they've got a meal deal that's going on where it's, I don't know, egg chips and peas or something, that it's making sure there's a bit more peas and a bit fewer chips. Or if they're doing a roast dinner, it's about making sure that they've got 2 good sized portions of veg on the plate. So it's a little bit like stealth. So you're increasing the vegetable content of people's meals without them really knowing. But they're not going to argue about it. They've gone to the shop or they've gone to the restaurant. It's already done for them. That's what they've gone for. So just make it an easier choice. And I've seen that in New Zealand, for example, where they've had a whole initiative on fish and chips. Rather than saying to people, don't eat fish and chips or eat them less frequently, they've just worked with the fish and chip shops to say, let's look at how you're frying the fish and chips, look at the oil quality, look at taking a few chips out of the portion, so reducing the overall calorie content. So it's about tweaking the behavior of both the provider and the consumer without having it become too much choice all the time, because you can get overwhelmed with constant having to choose what you're going to eat. Somebody's made that choice for you. This is the portion size, this is what you need, that will work. But I think what will also happen, and what I hope to see happening, is the advent of personalised nutrition. So particularly not just for those who can afford it, but if we're able to take it on within the public health system and use the NHS or whichever body is the most appropriate one to help people at an individual level with an explicit program that's just for them. So it's bespoke, is the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Because when you have generic public health messages, they're great from a population point of view, but they don't help sectors within that. So if you look at elderly people, they'll be looking at the Public Health England advice that says, you know, this much carbohydrate, this much protein, 5 a day. But actually, if they're trying to reduce their fat intake, that isn't necessarily a good thing. So as you get older, your dietary needs change. So they're following a population guideline that's not necessarily designed for them. The same for children or nursing mothers. And, you know, it's a dietary guideline that's set for everybody, but actually doesn't work for anybody particularly.
Yeah. How do we get past this? Because you're highly passionate, you're knowledgeable, you're somebody we should be listening to. And I know in your role within, within food system you are. But I went on to Instagram recently, and if you go to Instagram, I haven't really figured it out now, but everyone's got a dietary solution. Everyone's a dietitian, and there's capsules down to we're eating the wrong thing. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but fundamentally, from a scientific perspective, a lot of it doesn't seem right. This is the noise that food has become. You have all these people, and I think it's influencers we call them, that aren't dietitians and don't have the knowledge that's there. And how do we break that? Or is that just something we've got to live with? Some of the stuff you hear is crazy stuff, and I'm not a dietitian. How do we break that to people like scientists are influencing people? Or is this a danger we just have to put up with out there? What's your opinion on that?
Well, my opinion is it's slightly the fault of the scientific community, because I'm currently working with a couple of nutritionists to get them out on the TEDx platform like I did. Because when you look at TEDx, you can count all the nutritionists, I know them all personally. So we need to change that. Why aren't nutritionists going on to wide platforms and talking about how we can make changes and how we should be looking at working with food businesses and looking at working with the government? If people aren't going to do that, we can't blame everybody for going to other sources, because if nutritionists and dietitians aren't on the platforms, then it's not anybody's fault really. We need as scientists to go out there and spread that message. But what also I think we need to do is make sure that when we look at a multidisciplinary approach, we are working with sociologists, with geographers, and looking at the people who are looking at how society behaves and how they move and the choices that they make. So when that choice architecture is set up, we can be part of that rather than people finding out by accident. I think at the moment we've got some great data on how people are responding to influencers, where they're getting their information from and what they're looking for. And if we're not using that information as scientists, we're going to be out in the dark, because we're kind of scrabbling away, talking to our own community, our own echo chamber. That's not good enough. We need to work with people from outside of our sector who really know how society is behaving, and say to them, look, guide us in where we need to be putting our message and how we need to be getting that message across, because the way that we're currently doing isn't working. And what I've seen now from my community is that we just blame people from looking at the wrong thing and saying those people shouldn't be putting out the wrong messages. Those people have always been there. What we haven't done is make sure that our message is received in the right way and it lands with people in a meaningful way. And it's too easy to put everything on changing behaviour and saying, well, if all they did was just change their behaviour and change their lifestyle, it would be fine. We know that's not true. We know that if you live in Trafford Borough in Manchester, for example, your health outcomes, your life expectancy is going to be a lot lower than if you live in North Worsley or what have you. So it's not just about individual choice, it's about making sure that the environment that people are living and growing up in and working in is a positive one from a social point and a health point of view as well.
Can we have significant socioeconomic challenges in Ireland, UK, and we've seen in America. Can we bridge that gap? Are you hopeful? Is there the leadership there within communities, within political will I suppose to make those gaps smaller, to improve things? Are you hopeful for the future when it comes to some of those big challenges? I know you're probably an optimist, and I'm making an assumption on that now, but are you hopeful that we have that leadership? And I think it is leadership. People need to step up and understand we cannot ignore these challenges. We can't pretend they don't exist. And we've got to be very fair about how we take them on. Are you hopeful for the future?
I am an optimist. I'm also a bit of a realist, and I understand that it's not there's no overnight solution. But when you look at other countries that have managed to turn themselves around, if you take somewhere like South Korea, I went there as part of my Nuffield Farming Scholarship, and they were a really poor country for the last generation. They've really seen incredible wealth, but it hasn't just been wealth to a few rich families, it's been wealth to the entire population. And I'll tell you a little story actually that really surprised me. I'd gone to stay with an old university friend. So we both were doing our masters at Chester University together in human nutrition. And you know how you say to people, I'll come and visit you in your country one day, and you're like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, so I called her and said, I'm coming to South Korea. So she arranged me to come and stay with her and her parents. And her mother said, oh, let's go out to the spa tomorrow. I was like, yeah, fine, that'd be great. And she said, what it is, it's just all women only, and you'll just strip off naked and you walk around in the steam rooms and you can get a massage, and it's all a really healthy experience. I was like, okay, fine. So we got to the till at the desk at this spa place, and her mother got a purse out and paid. And I was like, oh, no, she can't pay for me, thinking it was like in the UK where it costs 70 quid a day or something. My friend was like, calm down, it's 6 quid. Right. And I was like, wow. So women there can go and spend a whole day at the spa. They can, eat there, relax there, get really clean, get a massage for £6 a day. Now, I'm not saying that is the answer to our problems. Every town needs to have a spa, right. But it's about levelling the playing field for everybody. At the moment, you can't even go to my local swimming pool for that price. By the time you pay for the parking, the swimming, and the bits and pieces that you need, you spent a lot more than that, and you've only got an hour. So it's about how you make activities more accessible for people. And I think, if a country like South Korea that came from dirt poverty to considerable wealth, their health outcomes are better than ours. They're quite a wealthy nation now, and they eat very well. So if a country like that can do it, we have got the opportunity here, because we're actively choosing to facilitate policies that are discriminating against women and against poor people and against different ethnic minorities. And there's a whole lot of things that our policies do to discriminate, not because they're written in that way, but because they facilitate certain choices that exclude people. So if you're preventing women from working easily because you don't have a good childcare policy, and men aren't taking up the ability to do the whole joint parenting thing, you can say, well, is that really the government's fault? But if you don't facilitate things and make them easily accessible, you can't expect those policies to work. And I think in the UK, what we've done is made things easy for a certain group of people to carry on, and they want to keep hold of their privileges and not allow everybody else to step up. So it's really about making it a level playing field and allowing access to exercise and health and diet for everybody, and not saying, well, I worked really hard to get here, they can't have it for free. That's not how society works. The ones who aren't able shouldn't be forced to tread that same path. There are always going to be people within our society who can't work as hard, who haven't got the capacity. They still need to eat, they still need to have a roof over their head, and we just need to show compassion. And the UK back in the 1970s and the 60s was a lot better at doing that. And it's had its ups and downs, but I think we can get back there. It might take another generation of people learning to let go of their materialistic lifestyle and pay a bit more into the tax system. But I, for one, don't want to live in a really nice house where I have to, drive into town and then step over a sleeping person in the car park, smelling of urine and looking unwashed, because I'd rather pay more tax so they've got a better home to live in and they can have a better lifestyle. I don't just want to keep a good lifestyle for me and everybody else can go do one. That's just not how society works, in my view.
I think we're at a real tipping point of that, in my experience as well, of where we show compassion, empathy to this type of society that we want. It's a huge topic, of course, the type of society that we need to grow and develop, because if we don't react to this tipping point that we're potentially coming towards, I think we're in big trouble. But it will take people like yourself with leadership and ideas to do the things that we need to do and have those conversations. Talk to me about your MBE. I see it beside your name. I don't know much about MBEs. I'm sorry, I'm a very poor researcher now. I should have this all looked up. But talk to me about your MBE. What did you get that for and what is it?
Oh, it's for services to food nutrition. So I was nominated by DEFRA, which it came as a real surprise because, you get your head down, you're doing all your different activities. It was just after I'd written my Nuffield farming scholarship. So I'd made a lot of research into vegetables and specific use of vegetables for nutritional need, and they really admired. I got a beautiful letter just explaining how they really admired the work that I'd done and to keep up the good work that I do within the sector. So I run CPD activities for nutritionists, obviously director of the Oxford Farming Conference. I work with the Nutrition Society. I'm now a trustee. At the time I was just doing lots of voluntary work for a lot of time and a lot of my time and energy, but I'm really passionate about spreading knowledge, helping people who are new into their careers to progress and develop. So I like to mentor young people. And I didn't think that people like that got MBEs. I just kind of thought you got your head down, you did what you needed to do, you helped people. And that was that. And I was getting a bit kind of worn down with it because you get to a point where I'm doing so much, I need to just step back. And then I got this letter and then I was completely blown away. And there's a lovely award system, how, I'm not sure how it works behind the scenes, but obviously people write in to nominate you and they then decide at the Cabinet Office what level of award that you're going to get. So I've got a few friends in the nutrition sector who've already got MBEs and OBEs, and I kind of looked at them as, they've done something magical and mysterious. I never thought that would be me. And even within the Nuffield farming community, I remember saying to my best friend after I'd been to the first conference, and I was like, I just have complete kind of awe of everybody. They've all got MBEs or they've got awards for this, that and the other. And she's like, oh, that'll be you soon. I looked at it, I was like, are you absolutely, I just didn't believe that would be me in that space. But you realise that the important thing is just to do the do. And, my dad always said, you get your rewards in heaven. That's one of his phrases as we were growing up. You do the hard work now, you don't worry about the reward until you die, which is a little bit harsh. It is lovely to get the reward whilst I'm still alive.
It is nice to get that recognition, but I've been that soldier as well, where you go to conferences and you're surrounded by these people and it's imposter syndrome maybe, and I had it when I went to my first international Nuffield conference. Everyone was at such a high level, and then I think over time you start realizing that there is an element of people come with their best version of themselves and maybe might be their truest version of themselves. And over time, the true characters shine out, and I suppose the ability within different people, and there's such a diversity in that and I think it is the society we live in. We do have that imposter syndrome as we see people by their titles and what they've done, and how can I compete with that? So I've had that experience, but recognition is important, and well done to you on that. I have two last questions for you, Barbara, and again, thank you for your time. I mean, you really are an interesting person. I would suggest people to go back and watch that TED Talk that you did as well. It's on the TED Talk, and YouTube is where I found it. Oxford Farming Conference, I've known about it for a while. Last year was the first year I didn't go to it, but I went and I watched all the presentations. Really some... again, a diverse range of speakers on different subjects, from Professor Alice Stanton. There was some stuff on marketing, regenerative agriculture, really thought-provoking stuff. Your role with Oxford Farming Conference, how is it going to be shaped this year? Because is it going to be challenged with COVID-19? What's the future of Oxford Farming Conference look like?
This year, what we decided to do was just embrace the digital format, because there was no other option at the point that we were making that decision. We didn't know what January 2021 was going to look like, and that might come to be the best decision, because we're already looking at issues of second waves popping up, not necessarily all in one part of the country, but in different parts. So we looked at the bite-sized formula. So what happens is the first Thursday of every month, there's a 1-hour webinar where we invite guests on a specific theme. So Oxford Farming Conference will be 75 years old. What we have done is we've looked back over the last 75 years and said, what were some of the themes that have come out, and taken a theme for each of the bite-sized webinars to focus on and look at. So the one that's coming out is the case for expansion. So next week, Thursday, Tom Levitt will be looking at that particular theme. So by the time that this particular episode of Tommy the Vet airs, they'll have been the week after, won't it? But it will be available on a recorded format. And then mine will be coming up in September. So I'll be looking at the world, its food and my farm. So I've got invited guests to talk about those 3 themes. So looking back at the 1970s, which was a time of real turbulence, because we had, issues with Northern Ireland, we had a couple of elections, we had recession, we had food shortages, we had energy crisis. The 1970s is a decade. I think anyone who survived that, COVID-19 and recession is going to be a walk in the park, because literally everybody was just struggling in that decade. I think if we can pull through that and take some of the learnings, that will give us a really good idea of how we can work through what's going to happen between 2020 and 2030. Because obviously the economic crisis is going to be very real. Leaving the EU is going to present us with a whole lot of challenges that are very real. I do think there will be issues within our food supply system. There may also be elections if that causes an instability. So it's about looking forward. And I'll say we've got the UK ambassador to the UN agencies who'll be talking about the world. When it comes to Its Farm, we've got Robin Anderson, who's president of Emerging Ag, who looks at how businesses can work and focus on promoting themselves and PR, that type of thing, and looking at how they can repurpose. She also has a farm to make more nutritious food, look at sustainable agriculture. And then we'll also have the Leaf CEO, Caroline Drummond, talking about farming and what Leaf has to offer and how the Leaf farmers are going to look at the challenges that are ahead. So the September one should be a really interesting one. And then going forward, we'll have a few more that to pick out from the different decades of the past of the Oxford Farming Conference as well. So that will take us up till January. And then in January, we'll have our one-day digital conference where we want to bring, again, an exciting panel of speakers to talk about different themes, but also have the ability to break out and help people to engage and network, because we understand that that's a really important part of coming to Oxford. The first time I came away with new friends, I came away inspired, and I came away wanting to be part of the Oxford Farming Conference. So if we can do that for the next generation of people who want to join the Oxford Farming Conference experience, that'll be amazing.
Brilliant stuff. Somebody, the last question, somebody who's got depth to them, Barbara, I have to say, and thinks about the world around you. And you mentioned that it's very important to you that the next generation, that you pass on the knowledge and experience and the inspiration. What are the messages, and we'll leave on this note, that you try and instill in young people who may not be in agriculture, who may be in agriculture, who may see it as maybe a career that's so far removed away from them that it's impossible to get to it, because it's going to be one of the most exciting industries over the next decades. I'm convinced. I'm telling that story anyway. What are the messages you say to those young people? What values do you instill? And I suppose from your own life lessons and experiences, the well you draw on. What are they? What are the things that you tell groups of young people that you get to talk to through in all your different roles?
One of the messages I've consistently tried to deliver is the message of not being afraid of failure. And that was a much stronger message since I came back from my Nuffield farming travels, because on my travels, we went to Israel and we saw how people there, they eat failure for breakfast. Yeah. No holds bars. They'll try something. If it doesn't work, they bin it and they move on. Whereas I think in the UK, what we're really nervous about is we have to get the best exam results. We have to be best in class. We constantly got to strive, and people get too hung up on doing things in a certain way rather than just going for it. And I think the food and agriculture industry represents a great space in which you can try things and not be scared of failure, because we know that there are things that just won't work. And we have to be innovative and try things just to get them moving forward and find better ways of doing things. And I think I'd say to young people, it's just be bold. You've got you'll start work at, say, I don't know, 25 and finish at 70. You've got plenty of time to try a few things and let them go wrong, and have 3 different careers in your career history. So don't worry about not getting the job of your dreams as your first job. Just do something that inspires you, that you're interested in, that you enjoy, and take it from there, because there will always be something new or something else to try. So for me, I think it's just about getting stuck in at the ground level and working your way through, and not losing sight of what you want, and just keep going.
Fantastic message to end on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I followed you for a while. I'm watching you swimming every day in the sea. You maybe
every day.
you might be that influencer where you pop out of the water at the end of it and say, "This is why I'm swimming 10 extra lengths. I eat this protein bar." If you can't beat them, join them, Barbara. I wish you loads of success in the rest of your career, and hopefully at some stage when I get back traveling to the UK, we'll meet in person at an Oxford Farming Conference, or maybe an Nuffield Farming Conference. So continued success, keep up the inspirational work, and I think it's going to be, we're at a very interesting point in food and agriculture and society, and we need leaders like yourself who are going to challenge us and give us a path forward. So well done, and thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a real pleasure.